Welcome. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, and we both welcome you back to another important episode of The New World Next Week, episode 213 to be precise. And James, there's a lot going on in the world, and in a way, like a lot of the times it does, all the stories seem to intertwine. Stop the presses, shocker, CIA lied to Congress, the White House, and Britain over the new torture report. And we'll grab this from across the pond from The Telegraph. The CIA lied to Congress, the White House, and Britain as it tried to cover up the scale of its global torture program, a damning inquiry revealed on Tuesday, December 9th. The full brutality of the CIA's secret enhanced interrogation techniques was laid bare when the U.S. Senate published its report into techniques authorized by the administration of George W. Bush in the years after the September 11 attacks. The CIA is also charged with exaggerating the importance of information obtained under torture to justify its actions, discrediting earlier claims that it had been essential in cracking high-profile terror plots, including a plan to fly hijacked planes into Heathrow Airport. The agency claimed that information extracted under torture helped in 8 major counterterrorism operations, including thwarting a plot to attack Canary Wharf and Heathrow, and leading to the capture of an accomplice of Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, and so many other greatest hits. However, the CIA claims that torture had helped protect Britain were repeatedly undercut by forensic analysis in this Senate report. James, I think basically you look around and see that corporate media, at least here in the States, comes down with a case of torture amnesia as they feign shock again, as they really never give us the context and the background of these kind of stories. Some of the other things that are spilling out, and again, there's no way I could give the blow-by-blow of all of these things that we've seen, because in a way, we've seen it all before. A lot of this stuff is already on the record, and we know one administration isn't going to prosecute the other because they're essentially all buds. One thing that is gaining traction, CIA paid Poland to host secret torture prison. And James, we do have a New World Next Week flashback to March of 2013, where the United Nations was calling on Obama to publish the findings of Bush-era torture. James, what do we do with all this?
Well, we resist the urge to vomit long enough to actually point out that I would love to believe that this is an indicator that the CIA and its cronies will have less ability to act with impunity throughout the world in the coming years, as they're under greater scrutiny from an ever-increasingly vigilant public. As I say, I would love to believe that, but unfortunately I don't. I just saw a sickening montage of C-SPAN caller clips put together by Truthstream Media that shows caller after caller defending all of the torture abuse that went on, because the thing that's happened, no one cares if this is illegal or not. I mean, the underlying question is whether this is moral or not. And unfortunately, this has now been spun into a political issue, so that there is a significant proportion of the public that, in order to protect their own political identity, are going to be signing on to this torture that took place. And so mission accomplished for those who wanted to move the goalpost a bit further down the field towards that immorality that is now open and out in the public. I mean, it's always been there, obviously, but now we're getting people to sign on with their very fundamental core identity to this idea that torture, it's good for the country, it helps protect us, and all of these other lies that are despicable and outright immoral. And this is a pretty worrying trend. And I think the bigger thing to keep in mind for Americans specifically is that, of course, your country is being used by this three-dimensional chess oligarchy that I've been talking about in my recent podcasts, and is being discarded by the wayside now. I mean, the ire and opprobrium of the world is being focused on the dead husk of the U.S. empire, and you guys are being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. That's something to keep in mind when you see these types of stories, because this type of thing will come back around, whether it's next year or next decade or 10 decades from now. It will come back around, and I'm not looking forward to that. I'm not relishing it. The Pandora's box has been opened here, so I think we have to reject completely what went on, and let's do our part to make sure that this never happens again. But unfortunately, it's not just up to us.
James, the great trick, and we've talked about this before, that's been going on for now 6 years and counting here in the States, is that you have amazing left cover, that you now have phony progressives now saying essentially what you were just talking about on C-SPAN, probably well-meaning sides of all the sort of phony funded political spectrums, but you basically have the Democrats going to bat for this because it helps them make the case that, yeah, because our boy got Osama. And so you have them fighting for something that they wouldn't. And that, to me, like, that's the real sort of mission accomplished, if you will. So, James, there are some other interesting and maybe even esoteric geopolitical notes that kind of relate to all of this, because as all of this is going on, meanwhile, Obama and Prince William get to hang out during the hashtag royal visit. So not only did they meet with our dear leaders, but the UK royalty, William and Kate, also met US royalty, Jay-Z and Beyonce at a basketball game, which has increasingly become, I think, one of the biggest areas of sort of predictive programming and sort of elite showmanship, if you will. It was also Pearl Harbor Day, James, and as the awesome Lionel points out, at Lionel Media on Twitter, Edward VII was critical in the Pearl Harbor deception. And I think we have to note that these eugenics-obsessed, inbred elites have been running these scams for a long time now. And as long as they have willing servants in corrupt intelligence outlets, I think we're going to continue to see things like George W. Bush, again, repeating the line that Clinton is always my brother from another mother. But this time he added that Hillary's like his sister-in-law, my sister-in-law, quote unquote. I think to wrap up, in a way, sort of the geopolitical shell game, chess game of war crimes, Amnesty International accuses Israel of war crimes. Israel calls it Hamas propaganda. So if you pull back in a way and look at a lot of this, you basically have a lot of spy versus spy, and it's a lot of showiness. And I think it's an easy transition, James, into our second story this week, which concerns, hey, what do you know? CIA agents causing chaos. But this time it's not real. It's just a movie, James. At least that's how it started out. James Franco and Seth Rogen have created a chain of events that is exposing Hollywood. And we can just grab this from the straight-up Wikipedia write-up about a new film called The Interview, in which Franco and Rogen have a popular tabloid TV show called Skylark Tonight, and they learn that Kim Jong-un is a big fan of the show, so they want to get an interview with him to legitimize themselves as real journalists. They're on their way to go to Pyongyang, and the CIA steps in, recruits them, and makes them try and perform an incredible mission: assassinate Kim Jong-un. June 20th this year, North Korea's unofficial spokesman, his name's Kim Myong-chol, he said, quote, get this, "There's a special irony in this storyline as it shows the desperation of the U.S. government and American society. A film about the assassination of a foreign leader mirrors what the U.S. has done in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Ukraine. And let us not forget who killed Kennedy. Americans. In fact, President Obama should be careful in case the U.S. military wants to kill him as well." So as this all started to happen, again, this is spilling out all over 2014, Sony, the studio that was making the film, worried they were going to get heat from North Korea, so they pushed back the film's release and started re-editing things within the film to kind of tone it down. Seth Rogen objected to toning down the edits on the film, and then, James, it really turned into a Hollywood thriller like it was written by former intel agents, like a lot of our favorite popular TV and action shows are. Sony got a massive hack attack, and this is when it spills into the sort of tabloid world, and now we're all poring over basically emails filled with nasty exchanges and insults and vaguely racist sniping coming from the highest parts of the entertainment industry, talking about the president, talking about other actors and folks involved. The interesting thing, maybe even the emails kind of show that the CFR's George Clooney may have predicted this as he's working on a new film called Hack Attack. Or possibly that the CFR's Angelina Jolie is a spoiled and talentless brat. So I think if you add Cosbygate on top of this, James, you got a lot of emperors with no clothes on, and these are the kind of things I try and I think focus on Media Monarchy. James?
Well, that's well put together, and it is an interesting tie-in. And I note that, as you say, that now, what is it? North Korea is now coming out and saying, oh, the U.S. can't even are torturing around the world. What are they doing? Trying to make stories about this. So it does. Again, it all comes back around to the geopolitical sense. But it's what a bizarre little story. And the bizarrest part about this is, I mean, just make up, I don't know, Best Koreastan or something. I mean, why make it about North Korea? I don't know. Anyway, a funny story in many ways, and I don't even know in which level of the Matrix to place this, because there's so many layers of it going on here.
We don't really know who, at this point, we don't know who did the hack attack. They allegedly say, oh, well, there's maybe North Korean language within the text, but isn't that exactly what you would do if you were, performing a virtual flag bit of...
Exactly, right. It's the Guardians of Peace, whatever that is. And wouldn't it be funny if that ended up being something... It was Seth Rogen who did it, so I don't know, to get back at the studio. I don't know. I mean, it's just a crazy story. But hey, sometimes when things happen at this level and we just get to see the messy results, sometimes that can be funny. If nothing else, and take some of these people down a peg or two. And as you note, I mean, CFR Angelina Jolie getting some of the flack. I'm not going to cry tears about that. So again, I'm just getting the popcorn ready and settling down for an interesting show.
I guess I enjoy, and again, media being my work, I guess I enjoy seeing it when the largest institutions are kind of ripped open and it's shown to be how kind of disgusting it is. Because if you do any bit of research, you go, oh, that's right. The entertainment industry pretty much has and always will be run by organized crime. And it's pretty well documented. So, James, that's a story I'll continue to follow on Media Monarchy. But let's move now to our third and final story this week that in maybe some way they all sort of relate, as we're wondering if all the world's a stage. Undercover officers in Oakland infiltrate protests and have been accused of inciting looting. So during the ongoing protests in Berkeley and Oakland, now over the last week plus, December 10th, yesterday, as I come to you here in the States, James, 2 undercover cops were outed by the crowd, proceeded to pull a gun and make arrests while still wearing their masks. And we can show you some of those photos I find pretty stunning, shocking, disgusting. I think, pick your word. I don't know that we could quite call that a good news note, but for me, when these sort of tactics are exposed, again, these are all just sort of elements of, these are false flag terrorism, using the same sort of tools that have been used throughout time. And I think all of what we've been trying to do in all our years doing this, James, is show how the magic trick is done so you'll stop falling for it.
That's pretty much it. So let's just add this one to the list. We have Battle of Seattle. We had 2007 Montebello. I think there was 2008 DNC. There was an example of this with some cops dressing up as protesters. It happens time and time again. This is just another data point on a very long list. And it's just a common tactic that they use over and over and over again because it's effective. But it is less effective the more we know about it, the more the information and awareness of this spreads, the more people in these protests are actually actively looking out for and exposing these undercover cops. Hey, here's a little tip. If you've got a 6'2" bodybuilder, extraordinaire in your midst who doesn't seem to blend in with the crowd, chances are it might be a cop. You might want to, keep an eye out for that. So again, just the knowledge, just the awareness is really the power to break this tool of trickery and deception, because it usually just relies on ignorance, naivete, and innocence. So let's smarten up, let's wise up, let's realize this happens all the time, and let's think about, given that's the case, what tactics would be more effective than allowing these people into the midst?
I think it's also more effective too when people are so easily emotionally manipulated and they're kind of whipped into a frenzy, at which point all of these things are just, the sort of the powder keg waiting to go off. So, James, as we do and as we close this episode, we've been asking folks for quite a while now to submit story ideas on Twitter using hashtag #NewWorldNextWeek. It's now almost far since outgrown any ability to grab just a couple of things. And there are always new folks kind of joining the discussion. And just the few we're going to add on here at the end all come from the same account. It's at MUMINRZ, MUMINRZ. And they're all vaguely economic notes. Americans are going to spend their $380 in our low gas price savings on Obamacare. That's the way the math is going to work out. The U.S. Treasury is quietly ordering survival kits for U.S. banksters as the 36th dead banker of the year has now added up as we've followed that story throughout 2014 and probably in the year prior as well. And maybe some little bit of good news, James. McDonald's imploding. They're reporting their worst sales in over a decade. That, again, just as we were saying, once you recognize it and once you sort of make the decision, and as you've noted, the battle is in your mind. Like, I don't have to necessarily, fortunately, thank God, I'm in a situation where I don't necessarily have to be out on the streets yelling and screaming. We can just remove our consent and stop going to those places, James.
Once again, that's such an important point, and we always seem to come back to it. Excellent stuff. Anything else going on in the media monarchy kingdom these days, James?
I did my first of hopefully several interviews on what's called Gamergate. And it's a story that I'd noticed growing and growing and growing, and one that involved, to me, it was like, this involves, sort of entertainment industry. It involves gender issues. It involves business, a lot of things that I'm interested in. So I actually did the first interview on Gamergate with someone that goes by the name Sargon of Akkad. Now, of course, like a lot of situations, the first thing you do, you got a lot of people going, why'd you talk to him? You shouldn't do that, and blah, blah, blah. The interviews there, I let someone speak their piece about the video game industry, which I don't know a hell of a lot about. So I wanted to let someone kind of have their piece, but I'm going to have other interviews and kind of follow what exactly is going on in Gamergate.
All right.